Your neighbor knows things about your dog that you don't. They know what time the barking starts. They know how long it lasts. They know which days are worse. They've heard things through the wall that you will never hear, because you're never there when they happen. Most dogs look completely normal the moment you walk back through the door. Calm, maybe a little excited, acting like nothing happened. Which, from their perspective, nothing did. But you've seen the evidence. The sofa cushion on the floor, the corner of the rug that wasn't like that this morning. The very specific silence of a dog who knows something is different about the atmosphere when you walked in. You assumed it was boredom, maybe mischief, maybe just a bad day. But behavioral researchers have been doing something for decades that most owners haven't. They leave a camera running, walk out, and watch. And what those cameras capture, hour by hour, heartbeat by heartbeat, is one of the most revealing findings in animal psychology. Your dog isn't just missing you when you're gone. Something specific is happening in their brain.
And it starts before you even close the door. In 2010, researchers at the University of Milan installed cameras in the homes of 23 dogs and left. Vocalization, barking, whining, howling began at an average of 3 minutes and 15 seconds after departure. Destructive behavior within 7 minutes. 7 minutes. That's how long it takes before the shoes are at risk.
But the more interesting finding was what came after. That first frantic phase, the barking, the door scratching, gradually subsides.
And from the outside, if you came home to a quiet house and nothing visibly destroyed, you'd assume the dog had settled.
It hadn't.
What the camera showed was that as vocalization decreased, panting increased. Heart rate stayed elevated. The dog had shifted from one expression of distress to a different one. The noise stopped, but the physiological activation didn't. And researchers tracking behavior over longer periods found something even more telling. The pattern doesn't follow a clean decline.
Every 23 to 28 minutes, there's a new spike, a renewed burst of movement or vocalization,
followed by a quieter period, then another spike. Not settling, cycling.
Now compare that to what cameras capture in dogs without separation issues. Swedish researchers at the University of Agricultural Science, these dogs spent approximately 97% of their time in passive behavior, lying down, resting, occasionally checking the water bowl. Not distressed, not bored, waiting. The difference between those two groups isn't breed, it isn't age, and it's barely even about genetics. The research points to one variable above almost all others: what the dog has been taught to expect. But before we get there, let's talk about what happens before you even leave. In the 1980s, veterinary behaviorists Borchelt and Voith documented something that has been confirmed repeatedly since. Dogs with separation anxiety often begin showing measurable stress responses while their owner is still in the house. Not when the door closes, before the bag comes out. Through simple conditioning, dogs learn to chain your entire departure routine backwards. You check your phone, you put on your shoes, you glance at the time. Each of those actions, repeated hundreds of mornings in a row, has become a signal. And the signal means one thing: I'm about to be alone. By the time you reach the door, some dogs are already panting. Some are pacing. Some are following you from room to room. Like they know exactly what's coming and are hoping, somehow, that this time you'll stay.
There's a practical implication here that challenges a lot of popular advice. The standard recommendation for years has been to desensitize your dog to departure cues.
Pick up your keys randomly throughout the day, put on your shoes, and then sit back down so those cues lose their meaning. Researchers at the Universitat Autónoma de Barcelona reviewed this in 2014 and found the evidence more complicated than expected. Making departures unpredictable doesn't reduce fear for all dogs. For some, it increases it. Because the problem isn't the keys. The problem is the uncertainty about what happens after you go. Your dog isn't afraid of your shoes. They're afraid you won't come back. The Royal Veterinary College ran a longitudinal study called Generation Pup, tracking 145 dogs from adoption through their first 6 months of life. They were specifically looking for what predicted separation-related problems, and they found something that surprised a lot of trainers. Emotional goodbyes didn't cause it. Long farewells, big hugs at the door, the whole 5-minute production some of us do every morning, no significant effect. What mattered was the return. Dogs whose owners came home to find damage and responded with visible upset, raised voices, prolonged reactions, that visible frustration directed at the dog, were 6 times more likely to develop separation-related behaviors. The dog doesn't connect your frustration to the chair leg it destroyed 4 hours ago. There's no chain of causation available to them over that time window. What the dog connects your frustration to is your arrival, and gradually, your arrival becomes something to brace for. And here's why that matters. A dog that's anxious about you coming home is a dog more anxious about you leaving. The two ends of the absence get linked. You walk out, they panic. You walk back in, they panic again. For different reasons. The whole day becomes a loop of anticipatory stress. The same study found that early use of punishment, telling off, smacking, even deliberately ignoring, significantly increased the probability. And the most common piece of advice owners receive when their dog struggles alone? Get a second dog. It has essentially no support in the research. A 2021 study of 77 dogs found that male dogs in multi-dog households actually vocalized more when left alone than single dogs. Because the separation isn't about loneliness in the general sense. It's about the specific absence of a specific person. A second dog doesn't fix that. It just means 2 dogs in the house having different problems. Somebody's neighbor is having a very long week. This is the part that gets missed most often. And it tends to get missed because the dog makes it easy to miss. You come home, the house is intact, no mess, no damage. Maybe your dog looks up from the sofa with an expression that says nothing in particular happened. You assume everything was fine. Dogs were exposed to unavoidable shocks. Later, when escape was possible, most of those dogs didn't try. They lay down, accepted what was happening. He called it learned helplessness, the idea that organisms learn to stop acting when experience teaches them that their actions don't change outcomes. In a major revision of that theory in 2016, Seligman acknowledged he'd framed it backwards. Passivity isn't something animals learn. Passivity is the brain's default when it's under prolonged, inescapable stress. What has to be actively built is the belief that your behavior can change the situation. A dog that stops barking after an hour alone hasn't accepted the situation. It has stopped believing that its behavior matters. And there's a more recent layer to this. A 2019 study found that in severely anxious dogs,
Long-term cortisol, measured from hair samples reflecting months of hormonal accumulation, was sometimes lower than in calmer dogs. Not because they were less stressed, because their stress system had been running so long, it had started to burn out. The dog that seems fine might be the dog you need to worry about most.
Here's something that rarely gets mentioned outside veterinary research, and should.
In 2019, a team at Linköping University in Sweden measured long-term cortisol levels in 58 dog owner pairs. Not the cortisol spike of a bad moment, the slow hormonal accumulation over weeks and months, captured in hair samples. The levels were synchronized. Stressed owner, stressed dog. Calm owner, calm dog. When the researchers looked at the direction of that relationship, which one was driving the other, the answer was clear.
The owner's cortisol was predicting the dog's, not the reverse. What this means, a dog already carrying a chronically elevated...
They start it from a deficit. The 8 hours you're gone aren't happening in isolation. They're happening on top of everything that's already accumulated.
The product industry around separation anxiety is enormous. Pheromone diffusers, calming supplements, anxiety wraps, white noise machines.
Most owners have tried at least one of them. Most owners will tell you the results were somewhere between modest and nothing.